Ms. Purser, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to those of you in the virtual hearing room. Please remember to turn off both your camera and video unless you are invited to speak by the chairman. I will now hand over to the chairman, Sir John Mitting, to continue proceedings. Chairman.
Thank you. As at the beginning of every session of evidential hearings, the recording may be made by my earlier this year is going to be played. If you're listening to it for the first time, please listen carefully. I am conducting this inquiry under a statute, the Inquiries Act, 2005, which gives me the power to make orders regulating the conduct of the inquiry, including its hearings. In the exercise of that power, I have made a number of orders which affect what you may and may not do in the hearing rooms and after you leave them. Breach of any of the orders is serious and may have serious consequences for you. If I am satisfied that a person may have breached an order, I have the power to certify the matter to the High Court, which will investigate and deal with it as if it had been a contempt of that court. If satisfied that a breach has occurred and merits the imposition of a penalty, the High Court may impose a severe sanction on the person in breach, including a fine, imprisonment for up to 2 years, and sequestration of their assets. Evidence is going to be given live over screens in the hearing rooms. It is strictly prohibited to photograph or record what is shown on the screens, or to record what is said by a witness or anyone else in the hearing rooms. You may bring your mobile telephone into the hearing rooms, but you may not use it for any of those purposes. You may use it silently for any other purpose. In particular, you may transmit your account of what you have seen and heard in the hearing room to any other person, but only once at least 10 minutes have elapsed since the event which you are describing took place. This revision has a purpose. In the course of the inquiry, I have made orders prohibiting the public disclosure of information, for example, about the identity of a person for a variety of reasons. These orders must be upheld. It is inevitable that, whether by accident or design, information which I have ordered should not be publicly disclosed will sometimes be disclosed in a hearing. If and when that happens, I will immediately suspend the hearing and make an order prohibiting further disclosure of the information outside the hearing rooms. The consequence will be that no further disclosure of that information may be made by mobile telephone or other portable electronic device from within the hearing room or by any means outside it. I am sorry if you find this message alarming. It is not intended to be. Its purpose is simply to ensure that everyone knows the rules which must apply if I am to hear the evidence which I need to enable me to get to the truth about undercover policing. You, as members of the public, are entitled to hear the same public evidence as I will hear and to reach your own conclusions about it. The inquiry team will do their best to ensure that you can. If you have any doubt about the terms of this message or what you may or may not do, you should not hesitate to ask one of them, and with my help, if necessary, they will provide you with the answer. May HN340 please identify himself and be sworn or affirmed at his choice.
Ms. Purser, good afternoon, HN30. Can you see and hear me? Yes. I understand you would like to affirm? Yes. Please, can you repeat our... Witness sworn in. Yes. Witness sworn. Thank you very much. Chairman? Chairman?
Thank you. There is a gentleman sitting behind you. Can you confirm, please, that he is the only person in the room with you?
He is the only person in the room, yes.
Thank you. I think he's there to help with the technology should you need it.
I do need it with technology, yes.
Snap. Ms. Hummerstone? Thank you, sir. Chen 340, you provided the inquiry with a witness statement dated 10th of July 2019. Are you familiar with the content of your witness statement?
Yes.
And is the content of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to refer to you as 340 or HN 340 throughout your evidence this afternoon. In the SDS, is it right that you used the cover name either Alan Nixon or Andy Bailey? In fact, you think on reflection more likely Andy Bailey. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
HN 340. I'm going to begin with some questions about your police training. You joined as a police cadet in the mid-50s. You became a uniformed officer in the early 1960s, and then a special branch officer in the mid-1960s. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Going back, please, to the beginning of your police training. Can you recall the length of your initial police training at Hendon?
The first period as a cadet was for 4 weeks. That was 78. And then in 59, it was 13 weeks as a cadet still, which was a normal period for people joining direct as a constable. And then after that, it was a 2-year probation period after I joined as a constable.
Thank you very much. And what was included in that 2-year training period? Were you taught your duty to keep the Queen's peace?
I should imagine it was, yes. Can't remember details because what happened was you'd have one day, a month probably, with an inspector going through various, bits of law and such. And that's as much as I can remember about it.
Oh, God. And how about training on the ethics and standards that should be adhered to as a police officer?
Well, again, specifically, I can't remember any details, but I mean, in that era, one accepted that as a police officer, you did things that weren't going to be against the law or such.
Okay. So you told us you had a probationary period initially of 2 years. Can I ask you now about your application and selection process for joining Special Branch?
Yes.
And was there a written exam?
Yes.
Did you also serve a probationary period for your Special Branch role?
Yes. I can't remember how long that was, though.
You can't remember how long. Okay. And in your Special Branch work prior to your deployment with the SDS, had you been required to be involved in any undercover policing work?
No.
Had you, in that time, attended any meeting of political activists?
No, not really. The nearest to that would have been that it was usual on a Sunday morning to 1 or 2 officers to go to Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park. But as regards closed meetings, I didn't.
Hello?
Oh, hello. Oh no, I definitely didn't. I didn't go to any meetings at all. In fact, you got the wrong person, mate.
Back it up.
Oh, hello.
They just made all that up.
What's going on? Sorry?
It's all gone.
No. What was that about?
What on earth?
I don't know. Let's carry on.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's see what happens. I don't know. Well, listeners. We seem to have a little technical error at base. Technical error at base. Calling UCPI.
Did we say something we didn't want to say? Are they coming for our assets?
Where were we? Where were we, Miss Hammond?
I don't know.
I was at Speaker's Corner.
You were at Speaker's Corner, yeah.
People did occasionally go to Speaker's Corner, but I didn't attend any meetings. Maybe it was Andy Bailey.
I appear to have lost my notes. Well, it's most irregular, I tell you.
Okay, listeners, I'd like to say viewers, we're just going to put ourselves on mute for a few moments. If you'd like to just sit back, listen to something else.
Enjoy the view of a completely blank live transcript.
Watch a bit of telly. Write in suggested questions to the Twitter stream. Okay, well, we're going to go on mute. I think we should go on mute, Ms. Hammond, until something further arrives, and we'll just wait here till further instructions.
Muting forthwith.
Thank you. Oh, Mike Ferguson. No, he was active in the field.
But you saw him at Scotland Yard?
Well, I can't remember exactly where I saw him, but, you know.
Okay.
Probably unlikely at Scotland Yard, because obviously he didn't go into there, as did other officers, didn't go into there. When you're in the field, you didn't go into Scotland Yard.
I wanted to just ask you about that in a moment. Just going back to what you were told by Mike Ferguson, was that the extent of the guidance you were given about preparing yourself for attending political activist groups undercover?
As far as I can remember, yes. Yeah, nobody else there was no set training routine, as it were, no.
And it wasn't suggested to you, for example, to have any sort of backstory available or anything of that nature?
Again, not as I remember. Oh dear.
Did it ever occur to you to create one?
Just going back, where are we? Oh, I remember, not as I remember, no, which is probably why I didn't have one. And did it ever occur, oh, hello. Oh, well, initially, no. Perhaps in, ignorance or naivety on my part, but no.
And did there come a time when it would have been useful to have had one?
Later on, yes, definitely.
Just very, very briefly, dealing with Mike Ferguson, you say he was still actively deployed at the time. Is that right? When you had that conversation with him?
When I first spoke with him, yes.
And were you aware whether he had any position of authority within the Stop the 72?
Not really, no.
Interrupt you?
Sorry.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Carry on.
All I was going to say is when you were active, you didn't discuss other officers' activities, what they were up to.
Right.
And what they were involved in, that was down to them. And you were busy with your own goings on, Does
it follow then that if I were to ask you whether he assumed any position of authority within the anti-apartheid movement, you'd give the same answer? You didn't know?
Well, I wouldn't have any idea, no.
Thank you. Whilst you were in the back office, before you were actively deployed, were there other officers there? Either officers waiting to be deployed or other officers who had been withdrawn from their active roles?
Well, again, as I can remember, I can't remember anybody having come inside, as it were, from being in the field. I don't remember anybody. And as regards waiting to go out, it wouldn't. Again, I can't be 100% sure, but it wouldn't have made a lot of sense to have more than one person, as it were, waiting.
Right.
Again, it might not be accurate on that totally, but that's how it would appear to be.
So this is right. You can't recall anyone being withdrawn who was in the back office at that time?
No.
Mm-hmm. And you think it's unlikely there would have been anyone waiting to go out?
More than one person, and that time that one person would have been me. So possibly before I went out there, may have been, but again, I don't really know.
I ask you that because at one stage in your witness statement, you're dealing with the clerical roles that were assumed by the SDS, and I think you said that clerical roles would have been assumed by SDS officers in the back office, either those awaiting their deployment or having been withdrawn from their active deployment. So I just wanted to explore who might have been in the back office at that time.
Well, again, myself, when I was there waiting to go out, that would have been me, but not as an ex. And the other people in there, as far as I'm aware, there was a couple of inspectors and a chief inspector. Can't remember his surname. Any more than that, they, as far as I'm pretty certain, they hadn't been active in the field.
Right.
Again, it's possible, but I don't think they did.
How long were you in the back office before you were deployed? Can you remember?
Not exactly, no. I mean, if I had to have a guess, I would say give or take 4 to 6 months, something like that, but I don't know.
And what were you doing in the back office in that time? Can you recall?
Again, the details I don't know, but it would probably have involved typing up reports and checking out various bits and pieces that, of information that had come from one, source or another. Other than that.
But by typing up reports, do you mean the reports that had been sent in by
yes,
other officers active in the field?
Yeah.
And did that assist you in understanding your forthcoming role to be looking at their reports and the sorts of things that they were reporting?
I suppose in a way it would have been, yes. Yeah. Give more of an idea than it had before anyway.
And you said there were a couple of detective inspectors, I think, in the back office, as well as a detective and a chief inspector also in the back office. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. They were there, might have been more, but they were the only ones I could think of.
Were there people you could ask for assistance or guidance about your forthcoming deployment?
I would think so, yes, as need be. But at that time, as I say, things weren't, you can say, structured to do that sort of thing, to, as it were, train and, prepare people in detail.
Whilst you're in the back office, did you undertake any group or political research about the sorts of groups that you might be rubbing shoulders with during the course of your deployment?
Again, not as I can remember, no.
How did you prepare yourself for going out into the field?
Good question. Not really sure. I think the answer to that one, I don't know. Nothing. As far as I can remember, basically nothing really.
You say in your witness statement that Mike Ferguson's only real advice was to simply play it by ear. Was that the advice that you by and large followed?
Well, there wasn't much else to follow really. Yeah, that's basically it.
Oh God. Really? It was a question of learning on the job, as it were.
Yeah, I was hoping he might have given me my so many pearls of wisdom. But as I said, once you're out there, nobody knows exactly what's going to turn up next, and you've got to be prepared for anything.
In your witness statement, you say you were, as special branch officers, you were trusted to use your common sense and good judgment, reinforced by your previous police training, particularly the instruction manual that you'd received during the initial training, to act correctly and avoid getting into trouble. Did that training inform your approach to, firstly, participation in crime, and secondly, with any intimate relationships with activists whilst you were undercover, do you think?
I don't really understand quite what you're getting at, really.
You said you were trusted to use your common sense and good judgment. You had police training to act correctly and avoid getting into trouble. And did that help you in your approach to, well, for example, if there was an opportunity to, you were in a position to where a crime might have been committed, did that assist you, having had that police training and that training in the ethos and sorry. Let me just wait a moment. I've just forgotten a word. The standards to be upheld as a police officer. Did that assist you, that training, that basic training?
Well, yes, I mean, as I say, that was basic training as a police officer. As before I joined and then after joining Special Branch, again, these things, well, for most people, I'm sure, were taken for granted. You know what I mean. It wasn't something that people made a big issue of, on a day-to-day basis. You just took it as fact. You're a policeman, so, act accordingly. And as regards the other things about getting involved in crime things and that with other people, as I say, what regularly cropped up was the phrase agent provocateur. So therefore, you didn't do something which could then be interpreted as you having, fallen into that as it were, trap, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I'm going to now ask you about the writing of reports and the contents of those reports. As a special branch officer, I think you'd been a special branch officer for nearly 5 years by the time you became an STS officer. Had you had previous experience of writing reports?
Yes, that was, a regular feature.
What sort of details would you routinely include in a special branch report? Would you include, for example, personal details of the individuals reported on?
If that was what the reason for the report was, then yes. In fact, it nearly always would involve personal details.
Thank you very much. So let's make it more specific. Looking at your role as an SDS officer attending a meeting, a political meeting, the sorts of things you would have routinely reported. Importantly, details of those in attendance. Would that be something you would routinely have reported on?
Yes.
How about identifying features of people in attendance? Is that something you would routinely report upon?
Not necessarily routinely, no. But I mean, if it was thought necessary, then, you know, for identification purposes, then yes.
How about reporting on the future plans and events of the groups whose meetings you were attending? Was that something you'd routinely report or include in a report?
Yes.
How about reports on group activities, discussions, or interests?
Again, same thing. If it was likely to be of interest, yes.
Is there anything else you can think of that would have been routinely reported?
Not really, no. I don't know what you have in mind, but no, not really.
Were you directed to not report certain matters, or was that not something that happened?
Again, no, not that I can recall. No, I mean, as far as I was concerned, what I saw, heard, and whatever, I'd record it and then leave it to the, you know.
So your approach. I'll interrupt you. Sorry.
Or whatever, to use it. I didn't see that as my task to, you know, censor things or not, you know, just report it as happened.
So you would put everything into a report, unfiltered. Other people may or may not filter. Is that your?
That's my impression, yeah.
The process of writing a report. You would attend a meeting, and then, is this right? You would go to the SDS headquarters, to the flat on the following day, if the meeting was in the evening, and write up your notes. Is that right?
That was generally the way it was done, yes.
And those were then submitted up the chain of command. Is that right?
Yes.
They were then typed up by the back office. You didn't type your own reports. Is that right?
No.
And other bits of information were then incorporated into those reports, file references, matters of that nature.
Yeah, that's the thing, yeah.
Were the files, the special branch files, available to you as an SDS officer on deployment?
I would imagine if necessary, but again, I can't remember specifically, but if for some reason, which I can't think basically why it could have been, but again, the problem with that, you know, possibly would be the files would have then had to be taken out of Scotland Yard, which, you know, is not a recommended thing, or wasn't recommended.
I think you told us earlier you weren't attending Scotland Yard at that stage. Is that right?
Well, when you're in the field, no, you didn't.
Did you see a report after it had been typed up?
Not that I can recall, no.
I think you said in your written statement, if you had seen it, you would sign it. Is that right?
Well, that would have been the reason for seeing it, you know, to send it to, you know, for a signature.
But in fact, you think you rarely saw them, if at all?
No, I don't. I don't recall that we did.
You say in your witness statement that you think the reporting that the inquiry has been able to locate is incomplete. Is that right?
The reports with my
full extent?
Even from, limited, not remembering everything. Yes, I would say that certain little incidents that I do have vague recollection of, which aren't contained in that bundle of reports with my name at the time at the bottom.
That was going to be my next question. Why do you think we're lacking some of your reports? What is it that makes you think that?
Oh, I've got no idea whatsoever, because again, that was not something that I had any contact or influence on at all. The only thing that surprises me in a way is the fact that, after 50 years nearly, even some of the reports are still in existence.
And how much do you think is missing? Is it a lot more reporting we're missing, or do you think it's just a small amount?
I can't really hazard a guess. It could be near or it could be way out if I'd made a guess, because it would be a guess, because I don't know.
And what sorts of things are you surprised not to see in that reporting? What are the reports that you think were missing? What sort of occasions do you think we're lacking reports on that you can remember?
Can I just make the reference to behind me, please?
Sorry?
Can I refer to the colleague behind?
Forgive me, for what purpose do you want to refer to your colleague?
Well, just to whether what we said earlier is what's being asked of me at the minute in relation to an incident. Anyway, yeah, I'll take it as it's all right then.
Could you do your best? And then if you do need assistance, then of course you may have it.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that.
Miss Hummerstone, what you said?
The only one incident that I do recall, and again, I don't remember much detail about it, only the very basics, is that I went to it wasn't a meeting as such, a political meeting, it was a function in Tottenham Court Road on a Saturday evening, and subsequent to that, after we left the, place, there, an explosion happened in the post office tower. Now, that I must have made a report. Obviously, I would have made a report because of the fact that I went to the function. I didn't know anything about the explosion until the next morning. I don't know, I can't recall it, but I almost certainly would have got a phone call from one of the, inspectors or chief inspector, because they would have known I would have been going to the function. And as it happened so close to the post office tower, they obviously would have contacted me to see if I had an inkling that what was happening or had happened. But of course, whatever time, I don't know, it went off, but it was in those days, pubs and that closed at 11, and I would have left at the latest around then, and it must have occurred after that. But as I say, I can't. There wasn't anything in there about a report that I obviously would have put in regarding that.
You refer to that incident in your witness statement. You were at a function with members of the Irish Solidarity Campaign that evening, is that right?
Yeah, amongst others, yes.
We will touch on that in a little while, okay?
As I say, I didn't see anything with my name on as a report relating to my attendance at that function, which I would have done, that would have been standard.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask you very briefly about your approach to your work as an SDS officer. You say in your witness statement that the primary focus of your undercover role was to gather information about forthcoming events, demonstrations, and pickets to prevent public order problems. Is that right? That's as you saw it as your primary function?
Yes.
You also say in your statement that you were not aware that Special Branch had any formal role in countering subversion. But you were aware that the SDS gathered information on individuals and organisations which were unfriendly towards the state and its institutions and might use criminal methods to achieve their aims. Is that right?
Yeah. So as I say, that was basically what Special Branch, as I understood it, was partly involved with.
And how did you become aware of this secondary role that you had? So the first role you had was in a public order role. The second role you had was gathering information on individuals or institutions who were unfriendly towards the state and might use criminal methods to undermine it. How did you become aware of that secondary role?
Well, again, as far as basically concerned, that's one of the main functions of Special Branch, full stop. Not necessarily confining it to the activities of the SDS, you know.
So did that form part of your training for your Special Branch role as a whole?
You could say that, yes.
Were you ever given any explanation or training or instruction on what subversion meant?
At the moment, I can't recall, but almost certainly something must have been said on those lines. But I can't recall anything specific. But that doesn't mean to say it didn't happen.
And how about extremism? Any explanation or instruction as to what extremism meant?
Again, same answer as just, but not, again, I can't remember anything specific coming out.
I want to ask you briefly about the extent to which you lived your life undercover. You say you were married when you became an SDS officer, is that right?
Yes.
And there was not much difference in the number of working hours between your Special Branch role and your SDS role. It was just a slightly less regular pattern of work, is that right?
Basically, yes. Yeah, the hours, the total hours would have been not much different, yes.
And there was a certain amount of weekend work in your SDS role because you went to demonstrations and you sold red mole occasionally at the tube station.
Yes, yes.
How much time you had cover accommodation, is that right?
Yes.
And how much time did you spend at your cover accommodation during the course of your deployment, do you think, on average?
I was there 2-3 times a week, perhaps. Certainly at least once a week to pay the rent.
And when you say visit, do you mean stay overnight or?
Very rarely did I stay overnight.
And so does it follow then that you'd return to your own address at night time?
Yes, yes.
Did that help, do you think, to perform your role as the undercover role that you had? That balance between your working life and your home life?
I reckon it did, yeah, because obviously you've got to put it bluntly, a certain amount of normality as opposed to which after all, whichever way you look at it, doing the undercover work wasn't normal life really. So yes, it was. It was a good foil, as it were, to the stress of doing the undercover work.
I want to ask you about a few questions about the SDS headquarters flat. You say you visited there every weekday afternoon, almost without exception, to complete and put in your notes. Is that right?
Yes.
When you attended, were there other SDS officers there?
Yes, most officers who were operating at the time, yes.
And were they all performing the same function? Were they all writing up their notes and putting in their reports?
Yes. As I say again, I can't remember the details, but that would have been the reason for going there, yes.
Was another reason to go there to socialise with people who were doing a similar job to you and have a bit of sort of downtime, as it were?
I think that was probably, an intention, although it wasn't spelled out that way. That sounded or seems, reasonable to suggest that, yeah.
And whilst you were at the SDS flat, did you discuss the deployments of other SDS officers?
Not really, no. I mean, it was, you see, when we were undercover there, each one of us were basically in different areas. Sometimes there would be an overlap, but something we made sure of that we didn't operate together. Also, although it didn't mean to say you wouldn't come across one of your colleagues, but not acknowledge them, They'd be somebody just, passing, as it were. So there was no great reason to discuss what was going on. And quite honestly, with the exception of a couple of people that we just mentioned in the reports in particular, I've got no idea who the others were involved with because I didn't need to know.
So, is this right? Did you not share your experience, even in a sort of sanitised way?
I can't remember. So, no, as I say again, because there's no great reason to.
Did your managers visit you in the SDS headquarters flat?
Oh, yes, because that's when they would collect the draft reports that we'd got ready for them.
And did they visit regularly?
Oh, yes.
And
not necessarily every day, because after all, if none of us have got anything to be collected, then they may not turn up on that particular day, but it would be several times a week.
And did your managers speak to you about the nature of your deployments? About the things that had arisen during the week? Matters of that nature?
Again, I can't remember in detail, but I mean, there would have been some bits of discussion, and we would have said about, in that meeting you went to so and so and so and so, and then perhaps been asked questions like that. But again, I can't remember it as being a set routine, as it were. But it seems logical that that's what they would have done because they were obviously interested in a bit of background to all, to what was written down.
And during those meetings with your managers at the SDS headquarters flat, were you ever tasked to undertake any particular work or find out any particular matter or anything of that nature?
Again, I can't remember anything specific. Being detailed like that. I mean, that doesn't mean to say things didn't, come up in that way, but I can't really remember anything being said particularly.
We know, for example, that there are a couple of occasions on which your managers did step in to give you some direction. One was in attending the Red Europe conference and another in declining an invitation to join the IMG. Would those instructions have been received by you in the SDS headquarters in the flat? Is that the venue where you would have obtained those instructions?
Oh, yes, yeah. Because as I say, we didn't go to Scotland Yard anymore. So that's the only place, basically, where stuff like that would have been discussed.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask you some questions about your tasking. Is this right? It appears that you were not tasked initially to infiltrate any particular group when you joined the SDS. So you weren't told by officers to find out about any particular group and join their group. No,
I don't. As I say, as far as I remember, no, I don't think that's right. Yeah, it was in the early days. It was vague and open, Again, following on the lines of what was discussed with Mike Ferguson, you play things by ear and go along see what, what's happening and basically what is available, as it were.
You told us that your previous special branch experience had not given you any experience in attending political meetings of any kind. How did you form an idea about the types of groups which might be an appropriate target for your reporting?
Well, again, I'm not 100% sure what or how, but bearing in mind, as far as I was aware, what we've been told that one of the incidents in Grosvenor Square, where there was public order activities which were not expected to be as bad as they were by our uniformed colleagues, it was then thought that perhaps by finding out from groups that were potentially going to be involved in such demonstrations, go and try and get information closer, to hand, as it were, rather than just relying on hoping that we could guess as to who and what's going to be involved in those sort of demonstrations, particularly violent ones.
You say that you were given a strong suggestion from the chain of command to attend a meeting at Conway Hall, and that I think you said was linked to the IMG. When you were given that, what form did that strong suggestion take? What do you mean by a strong suggestion? Can you recall?
I don't know what. Again, all I can recall and think is that for whatever reason, again, obviously building back or building up towards this thing, I must have been told, because I wouldn't have gone wandering off to Red Lion Square just off my own initiative. That would have been the way things worked at that time. That wouldn't have been the way things worked at that time. So it must have been mentioned to me that meeting was taking place. And therefore, to get a feel of what was out there and about, go along. Basically, that was it. Just to get the feel of it and see how it played out.
Can you recall how you prepared for that meeting?
No.
Were you given any sort of briefing about left-wing ideologies of matters of that nature?
Not specific to that, but I mean, as I said before, that was part of what the overall, nothing to do with the SDS, that was what the overall function of special branch, as I understood it, was.
And you at that meeting, which was, I think, attended by, I think you say, Tariq Ali and Vanessa Redgrave, spoke at that meeting, is that right?
Yeah, as I remember, yes.
And you approached them and spoke to them?
Yes.
And can you recall what the nature of that conversation was?
Not really, no. The only reason, well, as I say, the reason why I, again, having been let out of the office, as it were, go out, find out, see what you can do, I thought, well, I better try and make some progress, as it were. I didn't know anybody there. I mean, I only vaguely knew of these two. And after all, they were speakers, so they were involved to a greater or lesser extent than the people who were in the audience. So I thought, well, if I speak to them, who knows? And begun. And again, following Mike Ferguson's, advice, go in and play it by ear. And that's how it basically happened.
And Tariq Ali suggested that you attended the next meeting of the North London Red Circle, is that right?
It must have been him, yeah, because he was more closely connected with that than Vanessa Redgrave was, so it would unlikely have been her.
Was that a group you had heard of previously?
What, the Red Circle? I'm pretty certain not. But again, I wouldn't, 100% say, but I would have thought not, because as far as I'm aware, it wasn't a big, big grouping. It was just small.
And so is it right to say that was not a group that you were tasked to infiltrate by your chain of command?
Yes. No, it would. It wouldn't. I can't see that it would have been. I mean, they were possibly aware of its existence, but as far as I can remember, I wasn't until then.
So it was it happened by chance, in fact, that you attended that meeting with the North London Red Circle. Is that right?
Well, the chance plus the fact that as I'd shown a bit of interest in what was going on at that meeting, again, I don't remember the meeting in Red Lion Square. Who it was on behalf of, who the details were, I don't remember. But the fact Tariq Ali suggested me going along there, obviously thinking I was interested in that area of things, that's it.
And was there anything secretive about the way that you were invited along to that group?
No, I wouldn't have thought so, no. It was just, it probably, as I say, was being helpful to somebody who appeared to be taking an interest in that kind of thing.
Thank you. So how did your chain of command view the North London Red Circle? Do you know?
Not specifically, no, but I can't think that they, so they must have known of the existence of it before I'd been invited to go along there, but I don't know what they knew or what they thought.
Do you think they thought it was a good use of your time to attend their meetings and that the intelligence you provided had some utility?
I can't remember that, but if they'd have thought it was a waste of time, I'm pretty sure they would have said, don't bother. But whether I'm being, I don't know specifically.
You say of the North London Red Circle in your witness statement that whilst it had not been specifically identified to you as a target by your by your chain of command, it was sufficiently involved in supporting and arranging left-wing demonstrations, pickets, and other events that you could provide useful reporting on potential flashpoints. Is that right?
Basically, yes, that's...
Was that the impression you got from your chain of command?
Yeah.
I wonder if we would just please bring up the witness statement, please. It's hold on, MPS 0740414. It's going to come up on the screen.
Sorry.
I just want to refer you to a paragraph of it. It's page 12 of that document. That document, MPS 074014, page 12. And if we can zoom in, please, on paragraph 39.
That's not showing yet.
MPS 074014, page 13. Can you see that, HN 340? It says there, I do not recall whether I checked with the chain of command about the North London Red Circle or received any further formal direction from them. As far as I was concerned, the deployment was open-ended from the outset, although it was assumed that I could pull out if it became necessary and that I might be withdrawn, possibly with a view to being retasked if I was not providing useful information. In that paragraph, you talk about your deployment being open-ended. What do you mean by that?
Well, the fact that I was invited along or to go there by Tariq Ali, so when it says at the top there, I do not recall whether I checked with the chain of command. Again, I can't remember exactly, but it's pretty certain that having gone to the meeting in Red Lion Square, I would have done some sort of report in relation to that. Because, again, you didn't go to something and then just forget about it. So, that's that bit of it. And then as far as I was concerned, the deployment was open-ended, close quote. Well, it comes back to this thing again, the Mike Ferguson philosophy. Go and try it and see what happens. If they'd have said, as I said, if the back office chain of command people had not wanted me to be involved, then they would have said so. So they must have thought that there was a possibility of something, as it says at the bottom, being useful. That's, again, not from pure memory exactly as it happened, but it's assumption. And nothing fairly close to what would have been the case.
So it was really a sort of follow your nose sort of approach, is that right?
Yes.
And you say that you could have been retasked if you weren't providing information, but were you told that you were providing useful information?
Rarely did that. Not being too cynical there, but rarely did that sort of, in my experience there, and that wasn't the way things worked. If you did something that wasn't approved of, you'd have been told. But if it was something that was, for want of a better expression, was what you were supposed to be doing, then they didn't, shower you with praise, as it were. Just that's it. That's what you were there for. Get on with it.
So it was the fact that you weren't, as it were, told off that gave you the impression that you were doing something right.
Yeah, it must have been. Yeah.
Can you take that one down, please? Because I just want to look at one example where you do appear to have had some feedback on the work that you did. Can we have up MPS 0738137, please? Page 13, MPS 0738137/13. Could you hone in on the bottom, please? This is in relation to a report.
Oh, yeah.
From HN68.
Yes.
HN68 gave the founding conference of the Irish Solidarity Campaign.
Yes.
And on the following page, you can see that it is written by an assistant chief superintendent. This is an excellent and most comprehensive report which reflects credit on DSHN 340 and DCHN 68, who, it is known, worked under conditions of considerable difficulty. The coherence was clearly not the success hoped for by Lawless, and somebody whose name has been redacted for privacy reasons, and the very ready friction between IS and I think that's meant to be IMG supporters augurs ill for the future of the organisation. Can we just turn over to the next page, please? Page 14. And scroll down, MPS 0738137/14. And at the top, there are instructions to send copies of the reports to various others, including Box 500. That's the security service, isn't it? HN 340, did you know that?
That's what it was understood to be at the time, yes.
Also to copies sent to the Home Office, and that's signed by Assistant Chief Superintendent Roger Watson. Towards the bottom of the page, please, we can see a handwritten note from the Deputy Assistant Commissioner. The very detailed and interesting effort at 6A, which was the report's first class work by DSHN 340 and DCHN 68. Their knowledge of the main personalities involved, and the organisations, I'm afraid I can't read that word, stands out very clearly indeed. Please ensure that the officers are something informed by CI Saunders. Thank you. You can take that down. You can take that down now, please. I think you've probably answered this question, but was feedback about your reports common or uncommon?
Having read that, again, all I can say is that my memory doesn't sort of recall that I did get any that was said there, praise or whatever you like to call it, for that report. It doesn't mean to say I didn't, but I don't remember having been told that.
Okay. Thank you. In your witness statement, you say that the members of the STS were treated as experienced professionals and given significant discretion as to how you operated. What degree of oversight do you think was operating about your deployment? How much attention do you think your managers were paying to your reporting?
I don't really know what to say on that. I don't know. Other than the fact that, again, all I can say is if you were doing something that they disapproved of, then they would have told you.
Right, so that's
all I can think. Other than that, I don't really, have anything to say on that, really.
Right, so you just had to carry on until you were told to do otherwise. Was that the approach?
As I remember it now, basically, yes.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now to looking at your reporting on the North London Red Circle. You describe that as a recruiting ground for the IMG, and in fact, attempts were eventually made to recruit you to the IMG. Is that right?
That's as I remember it, yes.
As to the nature of the IMG, sorry, not the IMG, the North London Red Circle, can we please look at the following documents? UCPI 0000008183. Thank you. So this is a report from 28th of September 1970, I think. Your first report for the North London Red Circle is on 24th of July. So by that stage, you had been in the group for about two months, attending meetings of the group for about 2 months. The central paragraph states that there was a long discussion on the proposed series of talks, and it was decided that the first would be on 13th of the 10th, 1970, when it was hoped, somebody whose name has been redacted for privacy reasons, it was hoped that they would talk on Israel. The talks would be fortnightly from the 13th of October 1970 until the 8th of December 1990, and subjects to be covered will include Black Power, speaker yet unknown, IERMT, Jerry Lawless, trade unions, someone whose name has been redacted, and death of the New Left. The order of the talks will be arranged later. On 15th of the 12th, 1970, redacted, will lecture on why the Fourth International. And then in the fourth paragraph, a short discussion followed on the current Middle East situation. Are those the sort of topics that were of interest to those that attended Red Circle?
Again, I can't remember. I can't remember stuff, attending anything that involved, I can't remember attending anything that involved Israel. Obviously, Ireland, things happened, and the new death of the new left, that doesn't ring any bells with me at all. So I can't be specific, but I can't remember most of the content of that. Well, the content of that report there, it wouldn't have, as it were, stood out. If it did, I've forgotten it now. Sorry about that.
Can we now look, please, at another document? UCPI 0000008920. Thank you. This is a report from a little later during the course of your deployment, June 1971. In the middle of the page, sorry, can you just scroll up slightly? Thank you. The principal topic was a talk by, the need of women's liberation in a capitalist society. Her talk, however, was clearly ill-prepared and was poorly presented. She briefly gave the origins of the women's liberation and stated the four main demands of the Socialist Women's Group. Reading to the words, for equal pay, she emphasised that the Socialist Women's Groups were concentrating their efforts on working class women as opposed to middle class women who were less oppressed. To that end, they were working closely with unions, and in particular, they were attempting to form a union to assist women night cleaners in their struggle. These are clearly topics of interest to the people who attended Red Circle. The Red Circle meetings. Were these also topics of interest to Special Branch? Women's liberation and the involvement of trade unions?
Again, I can't remember going to meetings that were discussing, it says there, women's liberation stuff. And possibly maybe stuff regarding trade unions. Again, because of the potential for demonstrations, maybe, but I just can't remember. I can't remember that. Most of, again, what is in that report, I say most of it, I can't remember actually any of it, but it doesn't make sense. Well, it wouldn't have been something that I'll have said happened regularly, the women's liberation. So I don't know, can't say.
So you're not able to help us with whether these topics are of specific interest to Special Branch?
I can't speak for Special Branch as a whole, but all I can say is in relation to my involvement with the North London Red Circle, if it hadn't been for the North London Red Circle, for whatever reasons, they got themselves these people, the woman, as is mentioned there, giving a speech about a talk about it. I don't see that. Certainly, as far as I was concerned, it wouldn't have been something that I'd have been, guided towards going along to. But again, I'm not 100% sure of that.
You told us previously that your approach to report writing was to write down what had happened during the course of a meeting and leave it to those in the chain of command to filter out your information as and when required.
I was just going to say that this is a good example there, because obviously at that time, on that day, whatever it was in September, that happened, and therefore I put it down. But then, because I assumed nothing of any consequence as far as I was concerned was followed up on that, that's why I can't, recall it, because you know, it might have been of interest to the back office, but I don't know.
Thank you. Elsewhere in your reporting on the North London Red Circle, you report on the support given by the North London Red Circle to industrial action, including the National Union of Mine Workers. Also to a dockers strike, to the Upper Clyde shipbuilders work, and you also provide support for campaigns against racism, talks on unemployment and South Africa, and also talks on the Russian Revolution. And this is the last one of this sort of report that I want to very briefly look at. Can we look, please, at UCPI 0000008953. A report from 25th of April 1972. Scroll up just a little bit, please, so I can see paragraph 3. The main part of the meeting was devoted to a talk by Pat Jordan, The Russian Revolution. He gave an historical account of the events up to the October 1917 revolution, reference illusion. He then told how Stalin had betrayed the revolution by moving away from the original principles of Leninism, which had resulted in Russia becoming a bureaucratic state. The main points of his talk were aimed into reading to the words to question period. Can you recall from the view that the subject matter of the talk itself was, or maybe of interest to Special Branch?
Again, I can't recall anything of that. Again, I can't recall anything of that meeting, even down to the fact I'm not even sure where that pub is or was. As regards the rest of it, it doesn't have any, recollection at all in my mind, so I can't say anymore.
In
that last point, the main point is about praising, Trotsky and, condemning Stalin. I mean, that would obviously have been the gist of it to an extent.
It says nothing of particular interest emerged from the ensuing questions period. Does that indicate you were making a judgment about what may or may not be of interest to Special Branch in your report?
From reading that, just as it's written there, yeah, it would be.
And how did you assess what may or may not have been of interest to Special Branch?
Well, as of now, I don't know. I can't say. There must have been a good reason for me saying what's in paragraph 4 there, but now I don't know. I just don't know.
Okay, thank you. Sir, is that a convenient moment to take a break?
Certainly it is. We'll resume in a quarter of an hour at 3:35.
Thank you very much, everyone. We will now take a 15-minute break and we will be back at 3:35. You may now move to your breakout rooms. Thank you. Short break.
And we'll be back at 3:45.
This is a report from the 27th of August, 1971. Could you scroll up a bit, please? I just want to see the 3 paragraphs. This is the most important. Thank you. It's a meeting which took place in July of 1971. 24 people present, a rather large group. That's normal for the North London Red Circle. The 3rd paragraph down reads as follows. The only subject discussed was Ireland, and this consisted mainly of a talk by Redacted, which was followed by questions. Redacted talk revealed only one point of interest. This is his praise for provisionals. This represented a change of attitude by the IMG, of which Redacted is a long-standing member. It would hitherto favoured their officers. In answer to a question as to what help should be given to the IRA, should they begin terrorist activities in England, Redacted replied that IRA had not yet declared they had intended to start such activities here, but if they did, it would be the duty of all revolutionaries to render whatever assistance was asked, close quote. Referred there, of course, to the official and provisional sections of the IRA after the split from one another. Did it seem to you that the view expressed was not simply an IMG view, but a view held by a proportion of Red Circle attendees too? Can you recall?
I can't remember.
You can't remember?
I just don't know. I can't remember it. I can't remember the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Next report, you can take that one down, please. The next report is UCPI 8944. This report from February 1972, this time 30 people present, again a larger meeting of the North London Red Circle. Can you focus, please, on the 3rd paragraph mainly, please, 3rd and 4th paragraph. Thank you. This reads as follows, quote, the whole of the meeting was devoted to a talk by Bob Purdy on Ireland in place of a scheduled talk on Spain. Although Purdy's talk was quite interesting, he only gave an outline of the history of Ireland with an extra emphasis on the last 3-4 years. He also dealt briefly with the Republican movement. Later in the meeting, he pointed out that a split within the movement had arisen not so much out of political differences, but more through the manner in which the struggle should be waged. In the ensuing question period, the only question of note was one regarding the prospect of violent action being taken by the IRA in England. Purdy, who can be regarded as a non-violent revolutionary, said he knew of no such plans and recommended that anyone who heard of any such activities to forget them, as he most certainly would. To extend the military struggle to England would be politically wrong. However, if the leaders of the struggle in Ireland considered it was advantageous to do so, then it would be the duty of all revolutionaries in this country to support them. This has been the official IMG line throughout the present struggle. Quote, several times throughout his talk, Purdy urged anyone interested in the struggle to attend the ISC meetings, close quote. Again, can you recall whether there was general support for that view? That if the leaders of the IRA thought it advantageous to start an armed struggle on the mainland, that it was the duty of revolutionaries to support them? Can you recall whether that was a view held by other Red Circle attendees of that meeting?
Again, without appearing to be, totally out of sync with all that, again, I can't remember the meeting. The name Bob Purdy does, now I've seen it, ring a vague bell. But as regards what's in there, I can't remember any of that. But it probably would have made sense. I mean, that's why I put it in there as I did. But from what I remember of the members of the Red Circle, I can't think of any of them now. Well, that I would consider to be tending toward any kind of violence.
On that note, can we put up final report of the North London Red Circle. It's UCPI 8949. A report from April 1972. It's rather faint. But the third paragraph down reads the subject for discussion should have been Cuba. But the speaker did not arrive. Therefore, redacted, who had simply called in at the general meeting on his way home, stood and gave a brief talk on Ireland. As he had nothing prepared, he only gave a sketch outline of the background to the present situation. A few questions ensued, but they were of no interest. The proceedings soon lapsed into crass talk in between the French comrades present, of which there were about 8. The only point which aroused interest was a short discussion about the against the police in order to enter Trafalgar Square to hold a meeting there. It was explained that there would have been insufficient support for such action, and as such, it would have been doomed to failure, close quote. You can take that down now, please. In your statement, you say this about that report, quote, "The North London Red Circle was not a violent organisation or one which advocated violence. I've read the report dated 4th of April 1972, close quote, which is that one, quote, and the tone of the discussion seemed entirely consistent with what I recall, namely that it was a talking shop, close quote. Later in your statement, you say, quote, it did support a revolutionary agenda and was subversive to the extent that it advanced the overthrow of the established political system in the United Kingdom, albeit never took any concrete steps. And finally this, the North London Red Circle, for all its revolutionary posturing, was a talking shop which passively supported revolution rather than contributing to it actively. Violence would have been the last thing on many of their minds. Sloganeering was about as far as it went. During your time with the North London Red Circle, did you witness any violence or serious public disorder at any picket or demonstration organised or supported by the North London Red Circle?
No, I didn't.
And were you aware of any violence or serious public disorder at any picket or demonstration organised or supported by that group?
Not now. I can't remember if they did, but I'm fairly certain if there had been, it would have stuck in my memory, at least part of it.
You took over the role as club secretary, is that right, in that organisation?
Yeah.
And you say in your statement that you did that so you could find out other members' surnames, is that right?
It is, yes.
And were you urged to put yourself in that position by your superiors or encouraged by them to do so?
No, it just seemed to me at the time a good idea.
So it was your own idea to do that?
Yeah.
Why did you need to report the names of the group which was non-violent and had no criminal aspirations? Can you recall?
Again, I'm going back to the very beginning of this. If they were going to be involved in demonstrations, they themselves may not have been involved in or instigating violence. But it doesn't mean to say that other people that, again, go along to the same demonstrations have had the same ideas or motives as they did. And by knowing who's going to be involved, in case something did happen later, then it could be useful information.
I'm going to move on now to your reporting of the Civil Rights Solidarity Campaign. Later, the Irish Solidarity Campaign. In one of your Red Circle reports, you state that there were plans for Red Circle to become affiliated with the Irish Civil Rights Solidarity Campaign. And the first report with your name at the bottom of it, relating to the Irish Civil Rights Solidarity Campaign, is dated the 18th of September 1970. So, some 2 months after your first report, with Red Circle. You say in your witness statement that you attended the meetings of the ICRS almost as a co-opted member from the North London Red Circle. What do you mean by that, almost as a co-opted member?
Well, as of today, I can't remember the details of what you've just gone through. And all I can think of is that as I was at a North London Red Circle meeting, what seems logical to me that happened was it was discussed that they would send, or certain members or whoever wanted to would go along. And therefore, as I was at the meeting where they were deciding this, respectively, I was one of them as a member of the Red Circle. But again, I can't remember the details at all.
So, do you think that you volunteered yourself? You put your hand in the air and said, oh, I'll go to...
Again, in all honesty, I can't say yes or no. But it seems more likely that, again, just thinking of it as of this minute there, they probably wanted to send X number of people. And therefore it was, I ended up being one of those X number. But that isn't, for me, accurate memory. It's just bearing in mind how, as I recall it, things happened with them,
So you can't recall how you became one of that number?
Not at all. No, I can't.
Whether that was an act of choice on your part?
I can't remember if it was or it wasn't, but that to me seems the most logical as the way things generally worked. That somebody would have the idea that we should send, I don't know, say 6, 8, 10, 12 people. And there'll probably be only that amount of the meeting. So therefore it's you, and you, as it were.
Do you recall whether you were tasked by your team or command to attend those meetings, those Irish Civil Rights Solidarity Campaign meetings?
Again, I can't remember exactly, but what if it happened as I think I've just said there, that it was decided that so many people would go from North London Red Circle, and I was one of them, then what would have happened next I would have then reported that to the back office, and if they had any objections to it, then I would have made my excuses to the Red Circle.
So, in your view, it was sort of, remembering back now, it was simply chance that you ended up attending meetings of the Irish Civil Rights Solidarity Campaign group. Is that right?
Yeah, effectively. I mean, if I hadn't have gone to that, the Red Circle meeting on that particular, I didn't go to all the meetings. If you hadn't have gone to that one, then the good chances are that I wouldn't have gone to the ILC meeting. I would, that's my, way of thinking how things worked.
And put a slightly different way, was it your membership of the North London Red Circle which allowed you access to the Irish Solidarity Campaign? Was that your route into that group, was through the Red Circle?
That's how it would have been, yes.
You said you would have discussed your attendance at the Irish Civil Rights Solidarity Campaign meetings to your chain of command. Can you recall what their attitude was towards that group?
No, I don't. I can't, you know, I mean, there must have been some interest there. Otherwise, as I say, they would have said, don't bother going. Other than that, no, I can't remember anything specific.
This was, of course, quite a torrid time in history of Ireland, wasn't it? Can you recall an interest in Irish groups in general by your chain of command?
I think there was one who, yeah, HN68 was obviously, as far as I remember, the main one who was involved in Irish.
Are you aware that others were deployed into Irish groups?
Not really, no, because as I said earlier there, it isn't something, unless there was a particularly good reason, that we discussed amongst ourselves, you know, really.
You say in your statement that you can't recall attending the meetings of the Irish Civil Rights Solidarity Campaign, later the Irish Solidarity Campaign. Is that right?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I must have gone if, you know, if I'm credited, as it were, with those meeting reports. But as individual events, no, I can't.
Is it simply that you have no memory of their meetings, or that you don't think you went to their meetings? Which?
Well, I've no doubt that if my name is at the bottom of those reports, then I was involved. But it's gone. It isn't.
You attended the founding conference of the Irish Civil Rights Solidarity Campaign over the weekend of the 10th to 11th of October 1970. And I think that's something you can recall. Is that right?
Nothing detailed, but I remember vaguely that I did go. Obviously, it was by numbers. It was one of the bigs, you know, indoor events that I went to.
And was that?
And the fact that it was out of London, again, which is not something that I regularly would have been involved in, so.
Birmingham, is that right?
Yes, in that from those couple of facts alone, it would have had some, but details, I can't remember details of what.
Did you volunteer to go? Did you volunteer to go, though, that conference? Can you remember?
No, again, almost certainly it was the same. They needed a certain number from the Red Circle, and I happened to be there and available, as it were.
So is it, again, just simply chance, you say?
Effectively, could well, yeah. As I say, if I hadn't have been to the meeting where they decided that so many of us would go, then yeah.
Did you have to get approval for travel outside London from your chain of command?
Again, I can't remember exact details, but yes, you wouldn't go wandering off your own back. You would certainly, you know, tell them what was on, and then again, it would be down to them as to whether they said yes, no, or whatever.
And the fact that they've evidently said yes, does that give you some indication as to the level of support for your reporting in that area that they were giving to you?
Sorry, I don't quite.
Does the fact that they clearly approved that travel indicate that they were endorsing your report into the ISC?
Yes, I mean, yeah.
HN68 also attended that conference, as we've already seen from the commendation notes. Yeah. Did you attend together?
No. As I've said earlier, there we avoided as far as possible, only if it was, you know, not possible to avoid any contact with colleagues, whatever they, you know, we were involved in. But on this occasion, I mean, we didn't make contact with each other when they were there because he'd gone from a different route to me. So there was no reason that we should know each other. So we didn't.
And you've explained in your witness statement that he had an interest in Irish matters and your deployment was more about left-wing matters. Is that right?
Basically, yes.
So they were two converging interests brought together in the ISC.
Yeah.
Can you recall whether you were aware in advance that he was going to be there?
Can't remember now, but I would say the way things worked, I probably was aware, yeah. But as I say, I can't remember it as a fact, but it makes sense for it to have been so, and not for us both to be unaware that the other was going.
Your chain of command are clearly impressed by your report that you and HN68 produced. Did you collaborate over the writing of that report? Did you discuss it and put in your notes together? How did it work, the writing of that report?
Again, quite honestly, I have no idea. I can't remember what, but trying to think logically, it seems as if it would have been, well, inconceivable that we hadn't discussed when we were at the headquarters that. I mean, I can't imagine that we wouldn't have done, but at the same time, I can't remember anything specific.
We're going to look extremely briefly at some aspects of the report. Can I have on the screen, please, MPS 0738146. Today, please. And paragraph 3 indicates that there were approximately 60 delegates and 15 observers present, so quite a large group of people. Can you just scroll down, please, to paragraph 4? Paragraph 4 gives an indication of the organisations represented at the conference: the International Marxist Group, the Spartacus League, the Vietnam Solidarity Committee, Independent Labour Party, Irish Civil Rights Solidarity Campaign, and International Socialism, and observers from Agitprop and the Frank Keane Defence Committee. The report goes on to mention fraternal delegates included the CRA and also others present who were welcomed as VIPs. The family members of the person in custody for throwing tear gas into the House of Commons. Those details are the details that are likely to have been of interest to your chain of command and to Special Branch more widely.
Possibly, yes. I mean, that's probably why I put them in. But just, if I might, on that paragraph 2 there, the conference was on the Saturday and the Sunday.
Yes.
And as of now, I must have slept somewhere overnight. But quite honestly, I can't remember where we stayed. That's, I can't remember in detail much about the thing. But the answer to your question, yes. Again, they were there, so I reported it. And it's then down to the back office to do their, filtering, vetting, or whatever you like to call it.
Thank you. You can take that down now, please. The report contained a number of appendices. Appendix D is the Irish ISC Constitution, which sets out in the preamble the main aims of the ISC. Perhaps we can just look briefly at that, please. It's MPS 0738150.
You're looking.
There seem to be 6 main aims. Support of the Irish people's right to self-determination. Support for popular movements in Ireland, north and south, fighting political and economic domination by imperialism. British imperialism, rather. Release of all Irish political prisoners in Irish and British jails. An end to British intervention in Ireland and the immediate withdrawal of British armed forces. Opposition to those fostering religious sectarianism in and preventing working class unity. This is bollocks. 6, support of the right of Irish workers to arm and organise in self-defence of their homes from attacks by sectarian gangs, the military and the police. Again, in your view, is that information that was likely to have been of interest to Special Branch?
Again, at the time, I may have thought so, but as now, I don't know what. But again, the other thing, as before, that happened, and I would assume that there was a leaflet of some sort that had printed on and was distributed to those present, and therefore
such a leaflet. It was the Constitution printed that had been included in the report as an appendix.
Yeah, I would have thought.
Another appendix, Appendix A, is a document entitled Perspectives for the Irish Solidarity Campaign, which sets out the Irish should take to further their objectives. I'm going to ask for this document to be put up on screen because, in summary, it includes mobilising all those who could be won to support for the ISC aims by national demonstrations, rallies, nationally coordinated local activities, speaking tours, and by garnering support for trade unions, the Irish community, university students, and international organisations. Again, HN 340 is that information in which the ISC sought to realise their aims. Is that information likely to have been of interest to your chain of command?
Well, again, if I remember what you were just saying there, it was getting support for demonstrations. Then, that would have been of interest, I would have thought, in relation to numbers that were going to be turning up.
Thank you. In respect of your reporting on the ISC generally, I'm not going to take you to many of these reports for a moment, but for example, you report a picket of a Leicester jail where Eamon Smullen, a Sinn Féin affiliate, is being held pending criminal proceedings for possession of firearms. So that's a picket that's being reported there. Another report, you report about a suggested demonstration to show solidarity with a demonstration in Northern Ireland by the Civil Rights Association. And another, a demonstration in the form of a march from Speaker's Corner to the Home Office to protest at the treatment of prisoners in English prisons. And in another report, a picket of the Home Office to support the Civil Rights Association in Northern Ireland. Can I ask you this about your reporting on demonstrations and pickets and the like? Did you make, before you put in those reports, did you make any assessment as to the likelihood of any public disorder arising during the course of these pickets or demonstrations before you reported on them?
Again, I can't recall, but I don't see how, well, other than what I've said there, that for the most part, I wouldn't have anticipated that people I had contact with were going to be themselves instigators, at least, of any violence or disorder of, of a physical nature, other than just being present.
Right. So your reporting about demonstrations and pickets was simply that. There was no assessment involved. You didn't personally think this might lead to public order. You simply reported it as it was. Is that right?
As I can't remember the details, that's almost certainly how it would have been. I would have just, given the fact that I knew at the time, and that's it. Let the back office staff.
Was there any other means available to you for obtaining information about pickets or demonstrations other than attending meetings of these political groups? Could you not have sought leaflets or matters of that nature rather than having to attend meetings?
Yangs. I can't think so. No. That's leaflets of one thing which would be distributed and such, but I would have thought, again, not recalling exactly, but to be present when these things are discussed by people who are likely to be there and likely to encourage other young people to go would be a good way of getting some idea as to what's likely to happen. Yangs.
Yangs. I think in your witness statement, you've also said that having an undercover officer at ISC meetings where pickets and demonstrations were being discussed was important in case the ISC stopped publicising their events. Was that an anxiety that the ISC may adopt a more secretive approach and stop publicising demonstrations and protests and the like?
Again, I can't remember now. That, I mean, all I would say is that if that's what came out then, and I said that then that must have been based on how I saw it then. And bearing in mind that, again, the impression I've got occasionally of some of these groups just become a little bit, for want of a better word, paranoid and worried about, people are finding out things that they hope they wouldn't. But I can't remember details now.
We're just going to look at a few reports now of a slightly different nature relating to the ISC. Please, can we have on the screen MPS 073829, please?
Today, if possible.
Yangs, it's a technical nightmare.
I don't know what Yangs is.
Yangs.
Oh, terrible.
This is a report of the Central London branch of the ISC on 19th of January 1971. And if you can, please, can you scroll down to paragraph 6, which reads as follows. Redacted, then spoke on the events of the last 3 months. In Ireland, that is. The tarring and feathering incidents last weekend were carried out by both the official and provisional branches of the Republican movement. He did not think there was anything political to be gained from such actions, although it was obviously done to prove that the Republicans were in control of the area. This also appeared to be the view of the others present when contributions were made later. Redacted was unimpressed by the lead being given to the people by the Republicans and felt their continued strong support was due solely to the lack of an alternative. He was very critical of the Republican leadership and blamed them almost entirely for the failure to achieve more during the struggles of 1969, when they failed to make the arms held by them available to all those who could use them. Can we look now, please, at another report, MPS 07382216? This report is a couple of weeks later, on 2nd of February 1971. Can you scroll down, please, to paragraphs 4 and 5? There was a talk on people's democracy and the civil rights anti-apartheid movement, Northern Ireland. Paragraph 5 is the one I'm interested in, please. Redacted raised several points which were later taken up in part by Jerry Lawless. Pausing there for a moment, Jerry Lawless was an active figure in the ISC, is that right?
As I remember, yes.
In fact, in a variety of different political groups at this time. He was also a sometime attender at the Red Circle.
Yes, he's one of the very few names that I remember from then, because he was so active. I mean, he came to the Red Circle meetings. From the IMG, as it were, and not as a regular member of the Red Circle.
Thank you. Later taken up in part by Jerry Lawless and redacted, the main one was whether there should be a military arm to political organisations. He thought there should be no military arm, since this would inevitably lead to very close surveillance and infiltration by the police and security organisations, as for example in the case of the IRA, which was completely infiltrated. However, that didn't mean that the revolutionaries should not have a few arms for use at the appropriate time. Although Lawless didn't say much, he nevertheless made it quite clear he felt there should be a military arm. Redacted agreed with Lawless and added that the military must always be subordinate to the political, close quote. Another report in this vein, please, MPS 07382269. A little bit later in time, 22nd of June 1971, a talk on the subject, why the provisionals? And in the central second paragraph down, quote, redacted explained that the split which had occurred within the Republican movement about 12 months ago had been the result of the communist domination of the movement. It was due to that influence that when the need had arisen to use arms, there had been none available, since Communist Party policy was that it was better to use peaceful and parliamentary means to achieve Sinn Féin's objects. Redacted was bitterly opposed to such a policy, as the experience of the previous 50 years was that nothing had been achieved by such methods. Force was the only answer. Although he was very scathing in his attack on the communists, he made it clear that he was referring only to the Moscow-dominated communists and suggested that a good place for a bomb would be King Street, close quote. King Street, the headquarters of the Communist Party of Great Britain, is that right?
As I remember, it was at that time, yes.
And you say in your witness statement at that time to the inquiry that you cannot recall now whether those remarks attracted support or criticism from the other members of the ISC listening to it. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Finally, on this theme, please, can we look at the report at UCPI 8500?
One.
This is going to extend the inquiry by 12 months, isn't it?
Let's get the reports.
This is a report on the 3rd of March, 1972. Can you look, please, on the second page? Paragraph 8, UCPI 8500, page 2. Again, it's a very poor quality. Quote, there then ensued a long debate on the bomb explosion at Aldershot. This is not funny at all.
No.
Most of the contributions supported the action taken by the IRA, and the ASC slogan, "Victory to the IRA," was repeated several times as the only correct line to be taken by revolutionaries. The Aldershot bombing took place on the 27th of February 1972, so very shortly before this meeting, killing, I think, 7 civilians. Is that right?
If you're asking me, I don't know.
Can't remember. Okay. So you can take that report down because I just want to ask you just a little bit about that. Before the Aldershot bombing, did you have any contact with the detective branch of the police? Can you recall?
I can't recall, but I'm almost certain. I'm almost absolutely certain. No, because I can't recall at any time, particularly when I was doing the undercover work, that I had contact with none special branch. No. CID officers.
You didn't make contact.
Oh, non-special branch CID officers.
This makes no sense, does it? You didn't make contact yourself or alert them to the presence of the ISC meetings or anything of that nature? Saying, here I am at the ISC, I'm able to give this information on the Aldershot bombing or anything of that nature?
I'm not quite sure of the question, but if you're asking me if I had contact with the detectives who were investigating the Aldershot, then there might have been some Met officers involved, but obviously that's another police force, and off our own bat, there's no way that any of us would have had contact with a non-Met police force.
How about B Squad in Special Branch? What was the remit of B Squad? Can you recall?
Only to the extent that they dealt with Irish matters. Other than that, at the time, I had no contact with any, as I know of anyway, any officers directly involved with B Squad.
Thank you. Can we have this document on screen, please? UCPI 8501. This is a report from the 22nd of March. So about 3 weeks after the previous report, which dealt with the reaction of ISC attendees to the Aldershot bomb. The third paragraph down reads as follows, quote, the first item was the recent raids by police on the homes of members of the ISC and IS members who had previously been members of ISC. Redacted gave the names of some of those raided. And it's a cliffhanger.
Is the stream broken? Is Knitting fallen asleep?
As long as it doesn't start deleting like it did before.
Yeah.
That was nuts.
What was that? They just got it all wrong, or
I don't know whether it came back. Because we were reading on, we didn't have time to go back in the transcript to have a look. But it deleted about 3 pages.
Wow.
Yeah, it was weird.
Live redaction.
Yeah. 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 The experts at it now.
Or maybe someone fell asleep on the delete button.
Yeah. See, now it'll skip 2 pages and we'll miss a load. That's what it's done before.
Is it?
Yeah. I mean, it might. I mean, if it was a break in proceedings, it would say it would be a break in proceedings.
Yeah. So it's either the net down or something.
It'll just probably skip right up to the top, or it'll be way past what we can follow. So we'll just have to start from another obvious point.
Oh,
hang on. Somebody else is the host now. Hang on. I'm just going to mute for a sec.
so if you're just joining us, we're having some technical hitches. We will be back as soon as we can.
Times like this, you wish you remembered jokes. Oh, here we go. You jump in wherever you want.
Right.
Yeah, I'll jump in at that question. Right. And you say, I think, in your witness statement that it may simply have been a coincidence there was an ISC function nearby.
Again, following from what I just said, very possible, but I don't know.
With that possible proviso, were you aware of any concrete steps taken by the ISC to assist? I don't know whether this is us or if it's the inquiry.
Yeah, well, they've got 30 million quid to spend on this, so they could ideally be providing
doing this themselves. Absolutely.
And making sure the internet.
Mind you, we know what their techies are like. It'd be worse than this.
Okay.
Other than the stuff that I'm reading your bit. And can you recall the ISC participating in any acts of violence?
Not directly, no.
And were you ever involved in any demonstration organised or picket organised or supported by the ISC where you witnessed any serious public disorder or violence?
No, I mean, again, if I had been, I'm sure something like that would have stuck in my memory, and it definitely doesn't. So I'm almost absolutely certain that I wasn't, or nothing like that happened when I was thereabouts.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm now moving on to a hodgepodge of slightly different topics. The first involves touching on Bernadette Devlin MP. Within your reporting, there are 8 reports which touch on her connection with the ISC. Largely, it's right to say, reference to prospective appearances by her at events or her lack of appearance at events. I'm not going to take you to those. What was the purpose, can you tell us, of reporting the prospective presence or absence of a politician at public events?
Oh, I can't say. I can't say that there was a specific purpose. I clearly can't say very much at all. Oh, but the point of my mentioning her name is the same, or was the same, or would have been the same in relation to anybody else that was either at or connected with meetings that I was involved in, to the extent that I reported what? Come on, 30 million, they could have got a solid internet connection. What did I report? To the extent that I reported? What?
This might be our Zoom host's internet. That's the problem, you know. I mean, we could be unfairly blaming the
Oh, really?
incredibly organised inquiry.
Oh, that would be a shame.
It would be, wouldn't it?
We should keep going. We should keep going.
Oh, hang on. I think it's our Zoom hosts.
Maybe we could just watch the transcript elsewhere. Oh, look, it's off again.
Okay. And so does your answer equally apply to your reporting her resignation as the joint president of the ISC? Would you give the same answer?
Yes, yes, yes.
And would her presence at an event increase the risk of any public disorder in your view?
Again, I can't, go back and say exactly, but bearing in mind at that time she was a very well-known figure in, politics and various circles, and as such, if she was known to be going to attend any meeting or demonstration or whatever, then of course that would increase the likelihood of more people arriving at the demonstration and whatever. And the way these things often worked, the more people there are there, the more likely there is of, activity, not necessarily violence, but disturbances of some sort.
And conversely, would her absence have decreased the risk of public disorder?
I wouldn't say that it decreased it, but it would almost certainly have decreased the number of people likely to be attending.
Thank you. There's one report I just want to look at a little more closely regarding Bernadette Devlin. Can we please have MPS 0738244, please? It's a report dated 30th of March, 1971. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, please, paragraph 6. After the meeting, when most of the members had retired to the, if you scroll on, please, to the bar, Eamon McCann arrived at about 10:45 p.m, accompanied by Bernadette Devlin. They spent a considerable time in conversation with somebody whose name has been redacted, who had earlier been extremely critical of McCann, especially in respect of the article written by McCann, which had appeared in the Irish Times. And in fact, there's a copy of that article. I'm not going to ask you to look at it because it's got such minuscule print. We won't be able to read it. But it can be summarised perhaps in this way. It was an unflattering portrait of Irish solidarity groups and a criticism of them for their failure to attract the Irish working classes to the ranks. That conversation between Eamon McCann, a journalist, and an MP, can you recall why you reported that?
Obviously, I didn't hear the conversation, and I can't now remember, other than the fact that, as it said there, Eamon McCann arrived after the meeting had finished, and Eamon McCann was a well-known, even, I can remember now his name as being active. in whatever. Did you say he was a reporter of some sort? Did you say? I can't remember what exactly he did, but I know his name, cropped up regularly. So therefore, a working principle that he turned up, and also the fact that he turned up late for whatever reason, I don't know. Again, I reported it and left it then to be either put in or left out.
So it was simply the fact that he turned up late and had a conversation.
Well, that could have been, I don't know, could have been relevant in some ways, I don't know. But it was a fact. I mean, it must have been a fact because I put it there. Then I don't remember now. But as I say, it wasn't as if he was an unknown person. So therefore, So is this the inquiry or the kids on the internet? Oh, here we go.
Whoa. So therefore, was it a fact that he, Eamon McCann, a well-known Republican, was in conversation with Bernadette Devlin MP, another well-known Republican? Is that the fact that's interesting, do you think, to Special Branch?
As of now, I can't say that. I don't know. I can't what his, affiliations were, other than the fact that, as I say, he turned up at various meetings and functions, some of which I was at over the time and some that I wasn't. But as I say, he was well known.
Thank you. Can you just scroll down, please, to the third page, MPS 0738244, page 3. This is going to be an exercise of demonstrating by absence, but the appendix, the part of it that hasn't been redacted, indicate the presence of Jerry Lawless with his police file reference, Bob Purdy with his police file reference. There isn't a reference to Bernadette Devlin. There's no police file reference for her, and that's something that's common with all the reports that refer to her. So it appears she didn't have a police file on her, and perhaps that's just worth pointing that out. Thank you. Moving on, please. You can take that down now, please. Another set of disparate topics, please. First of all, the VSC. There is a report with your name at the bottom of it referring to the VSC. I'm not going to ask you to look at it. It's a report at which Tariq Ali made a speech about Vietnam, emphasising the need for all left-wing groups, regardless of their personal and ideological differences, to unite in the struggle against imperialism. Can you recall attending meetings of the VSC, or at least one meeting of the VSC?
No.
No?
I can't now. If there are reports with my name at the bottom, then I have to accept that I did, but I cannot remember at all. Bearing in mind, of course, that they, as with the Grosvenor Square demonstration, the Vietnam Solidarity Campaign were active in organising demonstrations around about that time. And
Tariq Ali was in attendance at that meeting. Would attendance have made a difference as to whether the meeting was also attended by the members of the SDS? Is it more likely there would be an SDS officer at a meeting where Tariq Ali was, or did his presence make no difference at all?
Again, I can't comment on that at all. I don't know.
There are a number of your reports which refer to Tariq Ali. Can you recall why you recorded his presence at meetings that you were attending? You attended?
The same answer as I've given before. He was there. I was there at the meeting, so I reported who was there.
So he wasn't anyone specifically targeted by you?
Again, anybody who was there was reported on. What happened to what I reported, whether it was, printed out into a report, was down to the back office, not myself.
Thank you. Moving on, there's one report regarding a meeting of the Irish Solidarity Campaign from September 1971, at which a note that Piers Corbyn was in attendance. Was that name, Piers Corbyn, a name that was known to you at this time in 1971?
Again, as far as I can remember, probably not. But there's an outside possibility that it might have been. But I can't say that it was of any particular. Again, he was there, I was there, the name goes down.
Thank you. I now want to ask you a question about reporting on anti-racist campaign groups. There are a number of reports which reference anti-racist campaign groups: the Black People's Defence Committee, Black Power. In your witness statement provided to the inquiry, you say that you refer to those groups because they were involved in demonstrations, and so there was a public order interest in reporting the names of these organisations. Were you tasked to report on an anti-racist organisation by your chain of command that you recall?
As I can remember now, no. But again, if these things cropped up during whatever, then it would have been put down and left to, the back office to make of it, what they deem necessary.
Thank you. There is a report dated 18th of September 1970, which is a report of a meeting to discuss the forthcoming National Founding Conference for the ISC. It was held at a private address. Were you given any training at any time about the circumstances in which you might enter a private address as a police officer? That you recall?
As I recall, when I saw the reports with my name on, which I think it's probably the address that you're referring to, I have to say that address doesn't register, or didn't then or now at all. In fact, not even do I remember going to meetings in that area. The north, that's the North London area, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't remember even going to an address in that area. But again, my name is at the bottom of the report, so at the time it must have been as it's reported. But to answer your question, the other aspect of it, no.
Okay, thank you. In another report, your name appears at the bottom of a report identifying 4 individuals who had attended an ISC meeting, identifying them from photographs, and, it seems, the photographs have come from Nottinghamshire Combined Constabulary. Was it a common event? SDS officers being asked to identify individuals from photographs? Was that something that happened regularly?
It did happen, as I recall, yes, it did.
And were requests such as that from other police branches common?
By other police branches, you mean outside of the Met?
Yes.
As far as I'm aware, I don't recall others. Again, that one that you're referring to, that I've seen something about it, and again, it doesn't register with me now at all. I'm sorry about that.
The Red Europe Conference, that was a conference that both you and HN326 attended, is that right?
Yes.
And you had to leave the country in order to attend that conference, is that right?
Yes.
You attended at the request of your chain of command, is that right?
Again, the exact details I can't remember, but that would appear to be, I wouldn't have gone without their approval, obviously, for several reasons. Not only was it outside the Met, but it was outside the country.
Were you aware that there was another officer in attendance at that conference?
I did, as I remember now, yes. It was known that both of us knew that the other was going. But as with before, no direct contact between us because that was the way of things. We didn't have.
And were you aware of the reason for 2 SDS officers to attend the conference?
Other than the fact that he, again, I don't know what organisation or organisations he was connected with. I don't know whether I knew them, but I can't remember now. And so he would have been going from a different angle than myself. So presumably the back office staff would have thought that possibly 2 different angles would have been, you know, better than just one. That's the best I can say. I don't know exactly.
And in your statement, you say that you were asked to go to find out who else was attending and whether there were any plans for significant demonstrations in the UK involving groups from abroad. Can you recall that?
I can't recall it, but if that's what was said, then obviously that at the time was as it was.
Is it right then, if I were to ask you who asked you to go, would you be able to remember that?
No.
Your deployment came to an end after possible compromise of your identity, which may have been caused in part by you repeatedly declining to join the IMG. Your witness statement indicates that it was your managers who directed you to decline that invitation. Is that right?
Yes.
And why did they direct you to decline the invitation to join the IMG?
I'll tell you soon. Cursor to the rescue. So people listening, we're having to do this because the inquiry itself is not live streaming. And apart from if you're able during a pandemic to leave your home and go and sit in a room in London, which a lot of us aren't able to.
Including
here we
judge.
go.
And why
am I going to join the IMG? I can't remember exactly the wording, but I would assume now it was because as opposed to the red circle, which I say was a loose, organisation, for want of a better word, IPCO was recognised as more of a political party. And as my now assessment and assumption, that's why. They didn't want special branch officers joining political parties, but that seems to me the most logical reason. I can't think of any other reason.
Thank you. The length of your deployment. You were deployed for a little more than 2 years or so with the SDS. We know that the original idea for SDS deployment, formed by its founder, was that the SDS officers would be deployed for no longer than 12 months. What's your attitude to that? What effect do you think that would have had on the utility of the SDS's deployment of 12 months?
I only found out about that proposed time period when I did the witness statement. Prior to that, I had no idea that had been suggested. But as soon as I saw that, I thought, well, having my experience, quite honestly, 12 months, you're not going to get very far or very much information in 12 months. That was my immediate reaction on seeing that as a proposal. I mean, the guy who did it must have had his reasons for suggesting that, but to me, it didn't, when I first saw it, and even now, it wouldn't appear to be that logical. I don't know how many officers did only do 12 months, but I can't imagine that there were very, very many, unless something dramatic happened.
You were withdrawn from the field in midway through 1972, and I think in your witness statement you say you went to work in the back office from March to April 1973. Whilst you were in the back office, did you have contact with those who were waiting to be actively deployed that you can recall?
I can't remember. But if they were in there and I was in there, then obviously yes. But I can't remember as such any particular, specific officers.
And it may then be of no use to ask this question. I was going to ask you whether you were able to provide any sort of guidance or assistance to those that were awaiting their deployment, to give them an idea what to expect and how to carry out their duties. Is that something you simply can't remember?
I was going to say I can't remember, but I mean, if it had been then, if I'd have been asked or whatever, then I may well have done it, but I can't remember now.
As someone working in the back office, were you carrying out clerical roles again? Was it a return to writing up reports, checking
background stuff and getting it all together? Yeah.
Did you visit the SDS HQ flat to collect reports or anything like that?
No, not after I went back into the back office. I didn't go to the flat.
So do you have any contact then with any field officers who were still in the field when you were in the back office? Any contact with officers who were in the field?
I can't remember, but it would have been highly unlikely. Highly unlikely.
Finally, this 340, you say in your witness statement that during the course of your deployment, you experienced headaches and nosebleeds, and you attribute those to the stress of your position. Did you feel supported properly by your managers from a welfare point of view whilst you were an SDS officer?
Add migraines to that as well on a regular basis. But in answer to your question, at that time, I don't know. It might sound, I don't know, macho or whatever, but it isn't something that you really discussed. Again, you got on with it. And probably initially I didn't, directly attribute it to whatever, but it obviously was due to the pressure. But following the Mark Ferguson line of things, get on with it basically. So yeah.
So you simply didn't question it. Is that you
got on with it? You got on with it.
Thank you very much, 340. I've got no further questions for you, but if you just wait there, others may. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Sanders? Mr. Sanders, no questions. Thank you, sir. Chairman, thank you. HN 340, a long afternoon, I'm afraid, but I'm grateful to you for coming along and giving the evidence that you have and assisting me in trying to find out what happened all those years ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now adjourn until tomorrow at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Slightly out of sequence because of the trouble that we had with COVID. Dave Smith is going to make his opening statement. His opening statement. There were going to be other witnesses, but for a variety of reasons, they're not able to attend tomorrow. And so there'll be a procedural hearing, which will be held in public, I think, at which I will hear submissions from various sides. Thank you for your help.
Can I ask a quick question, sir?
Yes, you may.
Is Dave Smith better then now? Do I take from that?
I believe so, but I will find out positively tomorrow morning whether or not that is so.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Miss Pearser. Thank you, everyone. The hearings have now finished for the day. We'll resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow online, where the proceedings will be live streamed. Therefore, the hearing centre will not open tomorrow. Our website has been updated with the changes to the timetable. Thank you very much. You may now leave or move to your breakout rooms. Hearing is adjourned until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, 17th of November.
At which point, presumably, we'll have to carry this on unless he decides to go for it.
See you Wednesday, everyone.
Enjoy.